First they took my father's business, then they beat him, then they took his life.
The synagogue was set on fire during the night. The fire spread so quickly that we barely managed to escape with our lives.
My grandmother, a 78-year-old woman from Carlsbad, was dragged out of her house in her dressing gown. We never saw her again.
In the wake of Hitler's rise to power and the passing of the Nuremberg laws, Kristallnacht, also known as the Night of Broken Glass, was a turning point for Nazi violence against Jews. As Jewish shops were destroyed, people were arrested, and many people were beaten. The world gained a glimpse into the dim future of Jews living under Nazi rule. The silence of nations around the world in the wake of these events led to the murder of 11 million people, 6 million of them Jews, and today serves as a message in the consequences of silence in the wake of human rights violations. Throughout history, groups of people have endured violence based on their race, religion, and ethnicity. The late 15th century, the Spanish Inquisition targeted those of Jewish, Muslim, or non-Christian backgrounds, resulting in widespread persecution, forced conversions, and executions. The peak of the transatlantic slave trade from the 16th to the 19th centuries subjected millions of Africans to brutal enslavement, exploitations, and violence, perpetuating deeply ingrained racial prejudices. Towards the century's end, violent pogroms against Jews in Russia caused significant death and destruction. Ethnic tensions and territorial expansions led to brutal conflicts, such as the Armenian Genocide in World War I, where the Ottoman Empire systematically targeted and massacred Armenians. Scientific racism further supported discriminatory ideologies justifying racially motivated violence. Despite warning signs, the world mostly remained inactive, paving the way for more shocking violence. After World War I, German war reparations and a global depression created desperation in Germany, leading citizens to look for a savior. Adolf Hitler, an ambitious leader, promised to rescue them, blaming Jews for economic challenges. Despite doubts, German President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor in 1933. In less than a year, Hitler undermined German rights, targeting various groups. Exploiting a Reichstag building fire, he enacted the Reichstag Fire Decree, granting the Nazi Party power to suspend rights and make arbitrary arrests, turning Germany into a police state and laying the foundation for a Nazi dictatorship. After von Hindenburg's death, the next year, Hitler became the supreme dictator, seizing complete control and enabling subsequent atrocities. That same year, the first severe anti-Jewish actions took place in Germany. Jews faced shop boycotts, public school bans, and the burning of Jewish-authored books. Initially, these rules targeted those identifying as Jewish or practicing Judaism, but by 1935 they extended to anyone with Jewish ancestry. Two laws, the Nuremberg Race Law and the Law for the Protection of German Blood and German Honor, were enacted that year. The first defined a Jew by ancestry, affecting even those not actively practicing Judaism. The second prohibited marriages between Jews and non-Jewish Germans, also criminalizing relationships labeled as race defilement. Then the Nazis launched a broad propaganda effort, labeling Jews as enemies of Germany. German schools taught children to view Jews negatively, with dehumanizing books depicting them as subhuman, conspiratorial, and blamed for societal issues. A traveling exhibition further spread stereotypical images, reinforcing the false idea of a Jewish conspiracy against Germany. Consequently, some specific groups of Jews began leaving Germany.
The scientists, the authors, the cinematographers, they left in the early and mid-30s.
After annexing Austria, Germany expanded restrictions to Jews living in all occupied territories. The worsening conditions led to nations of the world to predict an increase in those attempting to immigrate. In July 1938, they held a conference in Evian, France, to discuss the matter. However, due to difficult global economic conditions, most nations hesitated to permit mass immigration. Only the Dominican Republic agreed. The decision made by the leaders of the world proved to be fatal for the Jews. The situation for Jews in Germany continued to worsen as they were compelled to carry ID cards, and by October's end, all Polish Jews in Germany were forcibly moved, many at gunpoint to the German-Polish border. Among them were the Grispan family. Their son Herschel, residing in Paris, learned of the news through a postcard. Outraged by his family's plight, he bought a gun and went to the German embassy in Paris. On November 7, 1938, he made a move that would create a turning point for Jews living under Nazi rule. He asked to see the ambassador, but instead was given his third secretary, Ernst von Roth. Grispan shot von Roth. Though he initially survived his wounds, he succumbed to them 2 days later, giving the Nazis the justification they were looking for to begin violent actions. This turning point accidentally created by Grispan would turn the Nazis to violence in a way no one could have ever imagined. Gestapo chief Heinrich Müller immediately sent a telegram to all Gestapo police advising them actions against Jews, especially against their synagogues, will take place throughout the Reich shortly. They are not to be interfered with. Preparations are to be made for the arrest of about 20,000 to 30,000 Jews in the Reich. Preparations were made in the Dachau Buchenwald and the Sachsenhausen concentration camps for the Jewish detainees.
The nationwide attacks on the Jews began just before midnight on November 9th when demonstrators set fire to a display window of a textile business in Munich. 3 minutes later, the fire department received a call that the first synagogue was set on fire, but they did not put it out. It would not be long before alarms would be sounding throughout the Reich.
Stormtroopers banging on our door, coming in and just throwing things from the drawers, from the cabinets, frightening us, of course.
When the pogrom, which became known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, was over, at least 96 Jews were killed and hundreds more injured. More than 1,300 synagogues were burned and possibly as many as 2,000. Almost 7,500 Jewish businesses were destroyed, cemeteries and schools were vandalized, and 30,000 Jews were arrested and sent to concentration camps.
Your father is alive. He was taken this morning to Dachau, where he was beaten. All the men were shaved. They had very little food. The men being anywhere from 16 up to 60.
The Nazis were waiting for the right time to put these plans into action, and the event with Herschel Greenspan was the excuse that they were looking for. The excuse to turn discrimination into violence. Many of the men that they were arrested were released, in the hopes that they would get their families and leave Germany.
The aim of the Nazi government was to get rid of the Jews. However, they made it very difficult to do that. You had to have all kinds of records in order to leave. The problem was, where do you go? Kristallnacht made it crystal clear that Jews could no longer live in Germany.
While the U.S. condemned these acts, no nation offered to help. The Jews in Germany saw the actions as a turning point and escalation in actions of Nazi party and a signal of more harms to come. As a result, Jews in Germany tried to flee for nations around the world, including the United States.
Jews were leaving the country penniless. All their assets had to be sold.
People lined up at the American consulate to gain visas. Strict quota systems, immigration laws, and the poor economic conditions of the nation around the world led to extremely long waiting lists.
The United States imposed quotas. The quota for Germany was 27,370 people. There were over 300,000 people who wanted to enter the United States.
While many were trying to flee, new laws were put into place that aimed at isolating Jews. They included everything from taking away their driver's license to forbidding them to own radios. Jews were also segregated into ghettos within German towns and had to follow a curfew. All of these laws were the precursor for what would be known as the final solution. In September 1939, Germany's invasion of Poland marked the start of World War II. As the war progressed, the Nazis initiated a plan they called the final solution to the Jewish question. This was a plan to systematically murder Jews and mobile killing centers in the concentration camps. Soon the ghettos were disbanded and Jews were rounded up in cattle cars. They were sent to work camps or death camps. Despite global awareness from a report known as the Auschwitz Protocols, no nations intervened. It is estimated that by 1945, approximately 1.1 million Jews died in the Auschwitz gas chambers alone. In 1945, Adolf Hitler's suicide and Germany's surrender marked the end of World War II in Europe. Concentration camps were liberated, and the Allies discovered mass graves and evidence of torture. The Jews that remained in the camps were malnourished, some gravely ill, and most without anywhere to go. The world community, shocked by the horror, sought to punish the Nazis. This resulted in the first War Crimes Tribunal, which was held at Nuremberg. The court tried high-ranking Nazi officials, resulting in some receiving death sentences and other life imprisonment. Simultaneously, the United Nations, along with former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the inaugural document proclaiming equal rights for all human beings, aiming to prevent such tragedies in the future. These changes, resulting from Kristallnacht and the subsequent events, became a permanent part of international relations. In the years since, there have been multiple war crimes tribunals in which leaders of various countries have been forced to answer for accused human rights violations. Additionally, following the Holocaust, a proposal to establish a Jewish state in Israel, initially lacking widespread backing, started to garner renewed momentum. Due to the repercussions of Kristallnacht and the resulting atrocities, the resolution was eventually endorsed in May 1948. This highly disputed choice has sparked considerable violence, and to this day, a conflict persists in the region. In 1938, Kristallnacht marked a major turning point in Nazi treatment of Jews in Europe. It is known by many as the official beginning of the Holocaust. Between 1938 and 1945, millions of people died as the world community stood by and did nothing. For Jews and all that suffered from hate, the events of Kristallnacht and what came after should be a message that now, more than ever, humanity needs to say, never again.